that we already have diplomatic relations with Venezuela and flights to Caracas. But I mean, we opened this war by killing 50 of the top leadership of Iran within the first 5 minutes. That's unheard of. I mean, everybody I feel like is kind of operating under, you know, we're still all have PTSD from 2003 and the mistakes of Iraq and Afghanistan, and aren't looking objectively at what has happened and the incredible competence demonstrated by the combined forces of the United States the United States Navy and Air Force and the IDF. The combination of the two forces has, I mean, put Iran completely on the map. The missile strikes are down 90%, drone strikes are down 85%, and it's been a week. You know, people are talking about forever wars. I mean, those wars were 20 years. We're a week in, and people are already, I think, losing their composure over this. It's a really remarkably effective operation. A momentary spike in oil prices, I mean, is not going to shape things. I mean, think about how quickly the news cycle moves in the modern era. In a week from now, I don't know that you'll be talking very much about this, Piers, given how fast things move. So I doubt that.
Well, let me respond to that. I mean, I think that, look, again, I'm just sitting here trying to be objective about what I'm seeing with my own eyes. I had very vivid memories of 2003. I was the editor of the Daily Mirror newspaper in the UK. We were the Labour supporting paper, so Tony Blair's supporting newspaper, and we took an anti-war position. And, you know, I remember all the arguments in the run-up to that war. I remember the initial early military spectacular success that was enjoyed by the allies in Iraq. But then I remember the cold, hard reality setting in of what followed that, and no real plan.
Oh, man, hold on. Shout out to my man, Jeremy Ho. Hilarious. He sent a high five for 100 joules. Appreciate the support, because for every 100 joules is $1. So, guys, you can also send a gift as well if you want to be like my man, Jeremy. Appreciate the support, my man.
For what was going to happen with Iraq, the rise of ISIS, the fueling of Al-Qaeda, and so on. Complete mayhem followed because it hadn't been properly thought through. And what concerns me about this is not actually the clear, obvious military successes that have been enjoyed by the American and Israeli military, as you would expect. The American military is the most powerful in the history of the planet. It's not that so much. It's just that I think that with their responses, the Iranians are being quite tactically smart. What they're doing is they're trying to put the fear of God into people living in the Gulf states, many of whom are expats from other countries. They're trying to get them to leave, which many of them are doing. They're trying to destroy the business model of places like Dubai, which is it's a fun, completely safe place to come. And they're doing that by hitting hotels and airports and so on. And at the same time, they're controlling ruthlessly the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the world's oil flows. And, that is extremely concerning, not just because of the huge spike in oil prices and gas prices, but also because of the geopolitical element to that, involving China's reliance on it and Russia's involvement and so on. So I much as I'd like to be as optimistic as you are, I look at it and think, they may be being defeated in terms of military firepower, but the regime remains intact. They've replaced one Khamenei with another. The IRGC clearly have a stranglehold over the country. The combination of the bombing, putting the fear of God into Iranian.
You got 1 million soldiers. I mean, 1 million participants, people willing to die for the Ayatollah and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Yeah, that's a problem. That is a problem right there. And probably more people joining up right now due to the strikes.
And so they're staying in, and the IRGC's control means there are no rebellions on the street that we can see. So Trump's idea that this would be an organic rebellion off the back of the bombing raids by the Iranian people is not happening. And I'm looking at it thinking, well, okay, maybe it will be over in a week, but I'm not quite sure how this ends as simply as you think it's going to.
All right. So there's probably about 5 or 6 big arguments that you made there. So I'll try and address each of them in turn. First, let's start with the Straits of Hormuz. I think you're overstating the extent to which the Iranians have control over the Strait of Hormuz. Their entire navy is at the bottom of the ocean, and the Americans are there to guard it. And I think the only really remaining threat is some of the missile threat from the south, which is being aggressively degraded by the United States. You made a really big claim, and I think this is extremely important. You made a claim about how the other Arab countries, because they are being bombed by Iran, that this is a sophisticated strategy that's going to get them to question their continued work with the United States. I think it's the opposite. I think they all realize they no longer want to live under Iranian blackmail. And I think they look at Iran flinging missiles in every direction. I mean, a couple days ago, they flung missiles at Azerbaijan. And that's an important thing to realize because the leader of Azerbaijan, Aliyev, was the one leader in the region to give condolences to the death of Khamenei. And how did they respond? By launching missiles at a school in Azerbaijan. And you saw
just
him
to be clear, Will, on this point, just to be clear, just crystal clear, I'm not saying for a moment the Gulf states won't continue to support America. In fact, the complete opposite. I do believe it's been a massive strategic error, actually, by Iran to go after the Gulf states in the way they have. But I think from a tactical point of view, there's no doubt that in the short term, it has put the fear of God into people. And I think it may question the resolve of the Arab Gulf states, of the leaders, to want this war to be remotely prolonged, because they can see that the longer it goes on, the more damaging it gets to all of their collective interests. So I'm not, in fact, I think they are falling in behind America in terms of they hate what Iran is doing. We saw that from the Qatari prime minister overnight in an interview with Yalda Hakim from Sky News saying that. But that doesn't mean they want this war to continue. So the question then becomes, if there's a lot of pressure on the economics of this war, never mind the loss of life and so on the economics of the war, then how does this actually end?
So I think it actually ends up working the opposite way. I think that what the Saudis and the UAE and Qatar and Bahrain will decide is they don't want to permanently live under the threat of Iranian blackmail. And that's what this would be. If they made an early peace because they were scared about their economics, then Iran would just hold this over their heads indefinitely while they built up a huge ballistic missile capability, while they restarted their nuclear program. And then basically these countries would be at the mercy of Iran. I think so. What that means is that the Arab countries will decide in their own interest that they want this war finished. And that even if somehow the United States steps out of the way, I think they'd end up finishing it on their own right, taking advantage of the weakened Iranian regime right now to try and impose their will on it, even if in a world where the United States retreated from the scene.
Yeah, but I mean, look, to attack Iran, I mean, for sure. But you think that the Arab countries are going to go in there and try to overthrow Iran? Bro, you're tripping. You're tripping. They don't have the capability to. Like, we don't even have the capability to on the ground force side. That's why we're hesitant to do so. Well, actually, we do have the capability, but the thing is, we'll have, I'm gonna be real with you, extensive losses. And that's us. So imagine what these guys would face. And they're levels below us. So I'm sorry, but yeah, to sit there and think that the Arab countries or the Gulf countries are just gonna go in on Iran, they might do some strikes, sure, but to actually try to overthrow their government, yeah, that's not gonna happen. I mean, bro, I'm not even sure we're trying to do that.
Okay, let's bring in the other two guests. Owen Schroyer, what do you say to Will's argument? Very bullish, thinks that this is ending quickly and it's going to be a massively big win for the United States and Israel.
Well, I think Will has his White House talking points down almost 100%. I'm not sure there was an original thought there. The one thing he missed was you're not supposed to call this a war, Will.
You read a book in the last
You're
decade.
not supposed to call it that. Here we go.
You insulted me. We can keep doing this all day.
I'd love to, Will. I also find it funny that he keeps saying Iran blackmail, another talking point that is coming from Western media, as if we didn't just see the Epstein list and all the connections to Israel revealed with that. He says Iran blackmail. As far as the conclusions that we're reaching here, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure about these conclusions about the Gulf nation states. You know, when this thing first broke out, they said, oh, it'll be all the NATO countries and the EU countries and the Gulf nation states, everybody lining up against Iran. Well, it hasn't really been that smooth. It seems like a lot of them want to maintain good relations with the U.S., but they're not so sure about what's going on with this war. And, you know, you bring up what happened with Azerbaijan. They come out and say, okay, we're against Iran. And then they get hit with a bomb and you don't even scratch your head for a second. You don't even think for 1 second that could be a false flag, as if these things don't happen in war.
Wrong.
So I think that there's a lot.
They came out and gave condolences for the death of Khamenei and then got bombed.
Okay. Well, we'll see how this all turns out. I don't think it's going as smoothly as Will likes to represent. Like I said, I'm not sure there's an original thought there. This is the neocon. Will represents the neocon faction of right-wing politics that we thought we defeated in 2016. We thought we defeated again in 2024. This is the opposite of what Trump ran on. And that's the big thing here. We can debate about war and foreign policy. These things aren't going anywhere. The problem is this is a total betrayal of Trump's base. This is exactly against everything he ran on. and the 1984 Orwellian nature of the Board of Peace launching war after war after war and sitting here screaming about how Iran is firing missiles all over the world while Israel is in a war with 7 separate countries at the same time. The irony and the hypocrisy should not be lost on your audience, Piers.
Damn.
Okay, let me bring in Caroline. You were a former Trump spokeswoman. Where does all this sit with Donald Trump's repeated mantra when he campaigned in the 2024 election of America first, no more interference in foreign wars, particularly in the Middle East? And now here America is in the biggest interference imaginable in the Middle East, taking on Iran in this full-blooded, full-throttle way. Where does that sit with how he campaigned?
Yeah, Piers, first and foremost, I love the American military. I love our troops, just like millions of Americans do. And that's why we were so excited when a candidate like Donald Trump came on the scene and talked about no more involvement in the Middle East and no new wars. And I would go on TV and say that on behalf of the president during the 2024 campaign. And I was proud to do it. I was enthusiastic to do it. It wasn't just that President Trump was talking about that, no more involvement in the Middle East. Criticisms of our past involvement in the Middle East were extremely valid. An indictment of the neocon political class establishment and their record in the Middle East. It was the passion with which he talked about it. You can go back to 2016 and you can see the fire in him, the passion that he was talking about it with.
Really?
It really electrified people and moved them to put him into the White House. And so he said no new wars. And I think people are confused right now in the base as to why it looks like we now are in a new war in the Middle East. You hear this talking point going around that 90% of MAGA supports, this war. But that's not mathematically possible because if you look at the coalition that elected President Trump into the White House, if that was true, right, if 90% of MAGA supported this war, Nikki Haley would be in the White House right now as president. Marco Rubio would be president. I mean, the American people had a chance in 2016 to elect literally anybody else besides Donald Trump.
I mean, let's be real, though. Like, she got a point. Like, that's what we didn't want to vote Nikki Haley over, because she literally sat in front of all of us and said, we'll go to war for Israel. We'll go to war with Russia. We'll go to war with whoever. I was just like, hey, yo, get this lady off the stage. She cooked it for herself. So, bro, if we wanted Nikki Haley, if we wanted a neocon, trust me, Nikki Haley was right there saying all the neocon talking points to us. And we didn't like it then, but for some reason, we're okay with it now.
We're all on stage in that Republican primary saying we would love war with Iran. They had a chance to do that again in 2024 by picking Nikki Haley as their candidate, but instead they picked Donald Trump. I also think if 90% of MAGA supports this, I don't think your show would be getting the views that it's getting. I don't think Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson's show would be getting the views that it's getting. Polling is sort of an outdated way of collecting information. They say Vietnam was the first living room war, but it looks like this is the first war in the social media age. And social media is a way for you to see in real time how the public is perceiving something. We certainly use that on the campaign, I can tell you. Social media is a more accurate representation of public sentiment. You can track it in real time versus polling. So this idea that 90% of the coalition supports that just quite literally isn't possible when you look at the wide swath of people, independents, moderates, Muslims in Dearborn, Michigan, young men who all joined President Trump's coalition specifically because they were really excited about the promise of no new wars. And I guess that would be my question to Will, though, is, first and foremost, do you think that this is a war? Because the president has been on the phone with reporters, a lot of them who he calls the fake news, Politico, CNN, Axios, New York Times, on the record in those phone interviews, calling it a war. The Secretary of Defense has called it, Secretary of War, has called it a war. But the president hasn't publicly come out and said to the American people that it's a war. So, Will, do you think this is a war? And is it a new war?
Well, it's a very good question, which I will get Will to answer. What I would say, though, is I don't think America has declared war, correct me if I'm wrong here, but since the Second World War, and yet it has repeatedly gone to war. And I do think it's a complete farce. I have to be honest with you. As someone who loves America and loves your Constitution and loves Americans, the idea that you have not been waging war repeatedly ever since World War II is ridiculous. And the idea that this is not a war when the American mighty military has gone in full throttle against Iran, both at land, at sea, every imaginable way you can think of. It's crazy. Of course it's a war, isn't it, Will? Why do we pretend otherwise?
I mean, I think it's a war. I don't know what the legality of it is and why the president might want to avoid it. He might want to say to use the language.
Well, he doesn't have to clear it with Congress, does he? Well, the truth is they all do it.
I don't think
they all do it. I mean, well, it's the same reason. It's the same reason Clinton.
I hear you.
Oh, guys, make sure to double tap that screen and like the video, guys. Let's get more people on the conversation by double tapping that screen. If you have any questions, comments, jokes, or disagreements, I'll be happy to read it out loud and engage with it. Just $2 and up. Appreciate the support, guys. Let's keep it going.
But just to finish my point,
good reason not to do that.
It's a reason Clinton didn't do it with Kosovo. It's a reason that Obama didn't do it with Libya. If you don't call it a war, you don't need congressional approval.
Huh?
Right,
which is basically like like a loophole to start a war. It's like, look, I can get into a war. We just ain't got to call it a war. No matter how much of a war it is and gets dragged out to be, as long as we don't ever say it, it's all good, which is pretty shady.
Then we don't get to do things like knock out 50 of the Iranian leadership in the first 5 minutes of the war, right? We lose the element of surprise. This isn't, this isn't 17.
Bro, is this a war or not?
In 60s where there's no telephone communication across oceans, the sooner England hears about our wars 3 weeks later when a ship shows up, instantly the moment we declared war, the Iranians would know what's up, and that would be the end of our ability to gain the element of surprise. And that saves American lives. If we're going to do a military operation, I think that we want the commander-in-chief to do so in a way that minimizes American casualties to the extent possible. And so I think that it's totally justified for him to do that. I'm sorry, Caroline, I just am not impressed by saying that the polling doesn't say what it says. This is not just one poll that says 90% of MAGA supports it. It's consistently across all the polling that's done. You have 85% plus of Republicans supporting the president. And I think that it's because they understand that the president is not conducting the war in the manner of George W. Bush, that it's not stupid. You have to understand, this is not he created the space for negotiation after the 12-day war. You need to remember.
Ooh, I mean, how much your polls got? Cause my polls got like 1,400 people who voted, and 67% said no. Show me yours.
Remember, he hit those 3 nuclear sites and then immediately forced a ceasefire, including telling Netanyahu and Israel to turn the planes around when they had been struck after the ceasefire deadline. He wanted a negotiation. He wanted to be reasonable. But the problem is the Iranians, it's like the Black Knight and Monty Python. They refused to accept that they were beaten and refused to make any concessions. You need to just go listen to Steve Witkoff, who Tucker and everybody loved a year ago, explain what his negotiations were like. They opened the negotiation by saying, we have 60% enriched uranium for 11 nuclear bombs. We have an unalienable right to enrich, and we're not going to give you anything on the negotiation table that you didn't get militarily. Like, what is President Trump supposed to do?
But here's the thing. That's why we don't believe Steve Witkoff, or I mean, look, is it we don't believe Steve Witkoff, or we don't believe the Iranian foreign minister, because they came out of that meeting saying 2 separate things. One's, I mean, bro, the Iranian foreign minister said, bro, everything went good. Like, they literally said they're willing to go to zero enrichment and they're willing to reduce their stockpile, and everybody walked away happy. But all of a sudden, Steve Witkoff go to Trump and the U.S. public talk about, oh, no, they was bragging about their nuclear capability. They said they could do it at will. And I'm just like, yeah, bro, talking about 60% uranium, I'm sorry, but you need to get to 90%. And then just to put that bomb together, we'd easily be able to trace it, and and I'm gonna be real with you, all the steps to try to actually put a real nuclear bomb together. Yeah, we would catch them weeks away from the actual bomb being made, like weeks away. I'm gonna be real with you. We'd catch them like day 3 in, and they still need like 4 weeks left to get a bomb.
And if he
and we have not caught them in that process. Bro, we're still concerned about them enriching to 90%. What they ain't even did that yet. So, and let's be real, they could do that behind our backs and get away with it. But to actually build the bomb, they would not be able to do that successfully without us noticing.
Hours in the face of this.
Okay, but I would throw
this is my question really quick, though.
Hang on. Look, on this very point that Will just raised, and I'd like to bring Owen back in here just to respond to this. But this is what Antony Blinken, the former Secretary of State, said about Israel trying to pressurize Barack Obama to launch military strikes on Iran, and saying they would just attack themselves if Washington refused. Take a listen to this.
Back during the Obama administration, the Israelis were pushing President Obama to take military action against Iran, and were warning that they would do it themselves if he didn't. And he wouldn't, because he thought the better way to get at the nuclear program, which is what we were focused on, in the days after the October 7th attack on Israel, the horrific attack on Israel by Hamas, the Israelis were insisting that in the north, Hezbollah from Lebanon was about to attack. And they wanted to strike preemptively against Hezbollah. And President Biden said, look, we're with you. We'll always be with you in defending Israel. And if you're attacked, we're there. But we're not there if you're going to start something. And we came within about 30 minutes of having a war in the north based on bad information that the Israelis had.
No, I mean, I found that really interesting to be reminded of that, because, you know, has Donald Trump been played here by Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, let's go back on that.
Secretary of State said about Israel trying to pressurize Barack Obama to launch military strikes on Iran, and saying they would just attack themselves if Washington refused. Take a listen to this.
I mean, and because of that, they try to call him, oh, you're an Islamist, you're a Muslim lover, because he doesn't want to bomb Iran. Like, okay, doesn't want to get America into a regional war. All right. And thing is, this man still did some questionable military actions. I'll be real with you. Like, of course, we know, but kind of happy he didn't do that.
Back during the Obama administration, the Israelis were pushing President Obama to take military action against Iran, and were warning that they would do it themselves if he didn't. And he wouldn't, because he thought the better way to get at the nuclear program, which is what we were focused on, in the days after the October 7th attack on Israel, the horrific attack on Israel by Hamas, the Israelis were insisting that in the north, Hezbollah from Lebanon was about to attack. And they wanted to strike preemptively against Hezbollah. And President Biden said, look, we're with you. We'll always be with you in defending Israel. And if you're attacked, we're there. But we're not there if you're going to start something. And we came within about 30 minutes.
And damn, that was the difference. That was the difference between, well, Obama and Biden. Is like, bro, look, we'll defend you. We'll help you defend Israel if somebody attacks you. But we're not going to rush into every conflict that you want to get into. Then they were basically trying to drag us into a conflict with Lebanon because they wanted to destabilize Lebanon so they could take it. Like, what? But they already did take parts of Lebanon. But so, yeah, this kind of goes to show, is like, what are you trying to say? That the president was weaker than Obama? That Obama had more testicle fortitude to say no to the Israelis than Donald Trump? Because that's what it sounds like right now. Because Obama didn't let this happen. Not even Biden let this happen. This dude was senile. Crazy.
Of having a war in the north based on bad information that the Israelis had.
No, I mean, I found that really interesting to be reminded of that, because, you know, has Donald Trump been played here by Benjamin Netanyahu? Has he been sold a pup? Was he told, look, you know, they're going to go after us?
Yeah, it's like, I would have to ask Trump that too. Like, bro, your predecessor, like, pretty much was like, look, we're not jumping into a war for Israel, but here you are jumping into a conflict, war, whatever you want to call it, however you want to phrase it, for Israel. Like, remember, and Israel's threatened this before with other presidents, and they said, look, bro, good luck. Go ahead. Like, have fun. But you just decided to be like, oh, no, yeah, we're going to follow up behind you. And then we're going to frame it like it's America first. Crazy.
We're going to have to attack it imminently. You're either in with us or you're not. And they said, okay, well, we better come in. I mean, is that what's happened here?
Well, I think you have two separate things happening. I think we have to recognize the power of the Israeli lobby. I think this is something that the average American is now very aware of, the power of the Israeli lobby. And so now AIPAC is trying to find new ways to fund their candidates that don't go through AIPAC because it has such a negative stench on it now. But then there's Netanyahu. So AIPAC buying our candidates to essentially sell out America's best interest is one thing, but Netanyahu is a completely different issue. He's been lying to the American people and the United States Congress since the 1980s. He's been saying that Iran has days until they have a nuclear weapon. So obviously somebody's being dishonest here. It wouldn't be the first time that Israeli intelligence has lied to us. I could look at some recent times. I think the whole story about Iranian drones off the East Coast, I believe that was false Israeli intelligence. I think that the strike on that school that just happened in Iran, I think that was bad Israeli intelligence that we acted on. So I think Israel has been giving us bad intelligence, whether intentionally or accidentally, for years. And I find it funny that we sit here, and again, it's this blatant hypocrisy and irony, except it's not funny because we say, oh, we're saving American lives. Well, at least 7 American lives have been lost in this war so far that we know of. We also had 3 people shot and killed here at a retaliation attack at a bar in Austin, Texas, where I live. And as far as this number of 90% MAGA supports this, well, you can only believe that if you're counting the fact that the Mark Levins of the world who support this war more than anything, they get ratioed on every single post. And so they're the ones that are supporting this. They're the least popular. Tucker Carlson, whatever you think of his politics.
Yeah, I know. The least popular among MAGA, like the neoconservatives, the pro-Israel guys have the loudest voices. And apparently, if you don't agree with them, you're not American. You was never MAGA. When these same guys that you guys are like getting behind were the never Trumpers. I mean, crazy.
He's more popular now. And so I just don't see these things adding up in real life. And I think the issue is we've been dealing with this centralized media and even a centralized political narrative that's been able to kind of get away with lying and deceiving the American people. Maybe that's because they were distracted. Maybe that's because social media.
Oh, guys, you got any questions, comments, jokes, or disagreements? I'll be happy to take it. If just send in a super chat, $2 and up. Other than that, go ahead and double tap that screen, like the video, guys. Let's get more people in on the conversation. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well, guys. Appreciate the support. Let's keep it going.
It didn't exist before, maybe a combination of the two, but it just doesn't work anymore. We're not buying these talking points. And again, if you want to have a foreign policy debate, that's fine. The average American is sick of what's happened in the Middle East. And this is what resonated with that person while Trump was campaigning since 2015. We have spent trillions of dollars, at least 5 trillion, trillions of dollars in the Middle East. That's what we've done. And we've gotten nothing for it. We've gotten absolutely nothing but our blood and treasure in that region and nothing to show for it. And so Americans are sick of it. We would much rather spend $1 billion a day as the cost of this war. It's up to $10 billion now. We would much rather see that invested in our own infrastructure, our own people, our own country, whatever it takes. That's what this administration was supposed to be about. So if you want to say 90% MAGA supports this, then you have to account for at least 40% of the people that were once MAGA are not MAGA anymore. Otherwise, it makes no sense. And if we continue to let these neocons co-opt the actual America First conservative movements, then we're never going to have any real right-wing or conservative victories for this country.
Okay, I want to give Caroline the last word. We've run out of time, but Caroline, just very quickly, Polymarket, the prediction markets, asked U.S. forces enter Iran by March the 14th, 21%, March the 31st, 44%, and by the end of the year, 68%. So they're seeing money coming in, quite a lot of money, at Polymarket, betting that the longer this goes on, the more of a stalemate it is, the more pressure the Trump administration will come under and the IDF to commit troops on the ground. What do you think, just very quickly, that would do politically for the Republicans with both the midterms and potentially 2028?
There's absolutely zero support within the Republican Party or outside of that electorate for U.S. ground troops in the Middle East. I mean, the #1 trending hashtag on social media the last 9 days has been hashtag send Barron. So if that tells you anything about where the American public is at.
I mean, low key, though. I thought it was a little effed up that they were doing that. But then again, I was like, you know what? Maybe that'll make people steer a little different. No, shoot, let your kids sign up for it. If there's a draft, send Barron. I guarantee you Trump will drop the war the next day. He'll come to the peace. He'll come to the negotiation table, get back into the JCPOA. All you got to do is send Barron.
They don't have an appetite for sending ground troops to the Middle East, especially for objectives that remain.
And bro, people are saying it on both sides, the left and the right.
remain unclear, and for a war that doesn't seem to have a clear purpose. The administration has offered many reasons for going to war with Iran, but two of them have been in direct conflict with each other. One has been that Iran was an imminent threat to the United States, and the other has been that Iran has never been weaker, and so that's where we had to strike. Well, you can't be an imminent threat and as weak as you've ever been at the same time. Both those statements.
No, that was funny as hell. That was funny. She said you can't be an imminent threat, but also be at the weakest at your point, the weakest of all time. Like, this is your weakest moment, but it is such this imminent threat. It's like, all right, you're right. She's right. That's double speak.
Can't be true. And you see a lot of people who I think personally have not been loyal to the president in the past, and certainly loyal to his ideology. You see, Mike Pence and John Bolton, who have come on this show championing this conflict. But the question that I think the larger American audience is asking is, are we just going to be repeating the mistakes of the past? And the question that I don't see these voices that are cheering on the war having to answer is, just answer bluntly, how many U.S. troops are you okay losing, and how much are you okay having it cost? And with every objective that you lay out, every goal that you lay out, you should have to answer how many troops are you okay losing, what units do you want them to come from, and how much are you okay with it costing? Those are basic questions that you should be able to ask if you're waging war and answer.
Yeah, and remember the words of one of America's great modern military leaders, David Petraeus, the general, who said, the first question you ask is, how does this end? And I'm not sure anyone's really got a firm handle on that. Thank you very much indeed to my panel. I appreciate it. Joining me now is the former MP and host of The Rest is Politics, Rory Stewart. Rory, welcome back to Uncensored.
Thank you for having me.
I was amused in a kind of ironic way to see you and your co-host, Alistair Campbell, debating this when it all flared up a week ago, and Alistair giving the world a lecture about the need to adhere to international law when it comes to taking this kind of military action in the Middle East. Some of us have long memories, Rory. I remember 2003 when I ran the Daily Mirror and said the very same thing to your co-host, Alistair Campbell, repeatedly when we said it would be a very bad idea to invade Iraq without a second UN resolution. The wider question, other than teasing you about your co-host, and your facial expressions have given me all the answer I need. But rather than tease you about that, on the bigger picture, is international law now just finished as a concept? I keep hearing the argument from everyone, well, if the others aren't adhering to it, why do we have to? If they're doing this, we should be able to do this. None of them even call them wars anymore. The Russians call the invasion of Ukraine a special operation. Now we're told this is not a war either. This is, a conflict or whatever it may be. Are we just circumnavigating international law, do you think?
Well, let me take my defense of Alistair for red, so we won't get called down that rabbit hole. But you're right. Listen, something fundamental has changed. I think Trump's intervention in Iran is the beginning of a completely new world. It's been going on for 18 months, the signs of this, but this has shattered the order that America built after the war. America basically, after the Second World War, created a rules-based order, even if it was hypocritical, even if things went wrong, where broadly speaking, if you were a Western European country or you were in the Gulf, America seemed generous, relatively reliable, relatively predictable, and it followed process. Now, you can disagree, but it went. Presidents had conversations with Congress. They were relatively consistent about what they were doing. Occasionally, they'd try to go to the UN. All that's been blown out of the water. Suddenly now we have a president who has not consulted with his traditional allies and who has put the Gulf countries in a really difficult situation.